Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Turkish parliament approves a motion for sending forces to Iraq. Meanwhile, the Iraqi Interim Governing Council unanimously rejects the deployment of Turkish troops to the country. 2 U.S. soldiers and an Iraqi translator were killed in an attack west of Baghdad, and an explosion shakes the Iraqi Foreign Ministry building in the capital. Hundreds of Iraqis demonstrate outside a Shiite mosque in Baghdad, protesting the arrest by U.S. forces of a Shiite cleric, Muayyad Khazraji. The emergency Palestinian government swears in Ahmed al-Qurayh in front of President Arafat. Al-Qurayh said that ending the chaos in the Palestinian territories is the top priority.
Internal Palestinian talks differ on the fundamental nature of the new emergency government. 6 new ministers were sworn in at the headquarters in Ramallah. However, 2 cabinet members did not attend the swearing-in ceremony, thus raising many questions.
An infant was killed and his brother was injured by an Israeli attack in the area of Hulla in Lebanon. Sharon says that he will attack his enemy anywhere, anytime, and in any way. 1 person was killed and others were wounded in a demonstration in Islamabad after the killing of a militant chief and a member of the parliament, Athim Tariq. The East Asian Government Organization meets in Bali, Indonesia, to discuss the issue of terrorism, Myanmar, and the nuclear crisis in North Korea. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences announces that a Russian and 2 Americans won the 2003 Nobel Physics Prize for their work in explaining the nature of matter at extremely low temperatures. This is the end of the news in brief. 3 U.S. soldiers were killed and others were wounded in 2 separate bomb attacks, one in Ramadi and the other west of Baghdad. Meanwhile, hundreds of former Iraqi security officers demonstrate in front of the presidential palace, currently a U.S. Army headquarters, demanding their salaries and their jobs in the police force. They chanted the name of former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein to intimidate the U.S. forces who put barbed wire in their way. Hundreds of former Iraqi police officers and intelligence agents demonstrate in front of the presidential palace, currently a U.S. Army headquarters, carrying banners demanding that they be paid their salaries, which they haven't received for 6 months, beginning when the U.S. forces entered Iraq.
They say there are no salaries or anything for us. Damn this situation. We came here for our salaries. We haven't been paid for 6 months, and they are not telling us whether they need us or not. We want our salaries. Where are these human rights?
Some people were chanting the name of the ousted president in an effort to intimidate the Americans. This was a heated protest. They even took out their anger on us. Other people were showing the documents which the coalition forces asked from them in order to receive their salaries. However, they haven't been paid, and this is leading to more frustration.
They need to pay us our salaries and pensions. Otherwise, things will explode and people will riot. Everyone here is trained.
The demonstrations occurred in a central and vital location. Thus, all roads to and out of Al-Rusufa were blocked. In addition, the U.S. forces put barbed wires in front of protesters and pointed their rifles in the chests of the Iraqis, pushing them back, refusing to pay their salaries. These people have not been paid their salaries for a long time and are desperate. thus organizing this demonstration where anything can happen. Hamza Hussein, Abu Dhabi Television, Baghdad. Security sources confirmed that early this morning, a missile was fired at a house in one of the border villages in southern Lebanon, killing a boy and wounding his brother. This attack occurred hours after an Israeli soldier was killed due to gunfire shots across the border. Israeli officials accuse Hezbollah members of opening fire at Israeli soldiers, warning Syria and Lebanon of escalating the tension on the borders. Meanwhile, Hezbollah released a statement denying their responsibility for opening fire on the border area. The blue line in southern Lebanon was about to be destroyed once again, with unusual tensions that erupted in the past 24 hours, which may be in direct response to the Israeli air raid in Syria. The gunfire in two areas of the central strip killed one child and wounded another in the town of Hulla. A number of homes in the town of Kifar Killa were greatly damaged.
I came to this room. We lit a candle, but I still couldn't see anything. I heard Ahmed scream. We pulled him out, but Ali was already martyred.
One of them is 4 and the other is 5 years old. Their mom is Brazilian and sent them to be raised here. They've been here for 10 months, since January. They were happy and we were going to raise them well. But this is the end result.
Hezbollah, who has military power near the blue line, denied responsibility for the gunfire targeting an Israeli patrol unit near Limtuli, killing an Israeli soldier and wounding another. Meanwhile, Lebanon tightened its security measures on the borders in fear of further deterioration. Initial reports indicate that some of the Palestinian factions may be responsible for this incident, thus increasing tensions in this relatively calm area. If there is connection between the Israeli raid in Syria and this incident near the blue line in southern Lebanon, then this may be an indication that this area will not witness progress in the coming days, especially after Hezbollah announced that it is not responsible for the gunfire that occurred on the borders. Rafiq Nasrallah, Abu Dhabi Television, Hulla, southern Lebanon.
Iraq has been rocked by a series of bombings that left 3 U.S. soldiers dead and several others wounded. 3 Iraqi policemen were wounded in an attack on the police station in Maquba, northeast of Baghdad. In Ankara, the Turkish parliament gave the government the green light to send troops to Iraq. The move is expected to rise tensions in Iraq as the ruling council has signaled that Turkish troops are not welcomed. More in this Reuters report.
In Tikrit, hometown of ousted Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, a landmine battered this American Humvee, leaving the tires in shreds. 3 U.S. soldiers were only slightly wounded. But in the volatile territory around the capital, Baghdad, U.S. Central Command says 3 American soldiers and an Iraqi interpreter were killed in separate bomb attacks on Monday. The Iraqi Foreign Ministry was also bombed, but U.S. military officials says nobody was hurt.
Small explosion inside. There was no casualties or no injuries involved. One explosion, and there were reports of sporadic gunfire shortly after the explosion, but the origination source of those fires are unknown at this time.
The only certainty is the rising tensions between soldiers and Iraqis. Shots were exchanged between American troops and protesters during this demonstration. In Ankara, the Turkish parliament voted to send troops to Iraq to help police the near-lawless state. The Iraqi governing council has decided not to accept troops from neighboring countries. But American Paul Bremer has the final say.
Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said Israel would not hesitate to attack its enemies at any place and any time it deems necessary after a weekend Israeli airstrike on Syrian soil. He added Israel was also ready for peace at a ceremony to mark the 30th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. And his spokesman Ran Angelson said Israel's security cabinet decided after the August 19 bus bombing, quote, there would be no limitations, not even geographic, to get the leadership or the infrastructure of the so-called terrorist groups, unquote. He added the rules of the game have changed. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad accused Israel of attempting to drag Syria and the Middle East into a wide-scale conflict. Assad's first comments on Israel's weekend strike came after the United Nations Security Council failed to vote Monday on a draft resolution to condemn Israel over its aggression against Syria. Washington, now presiding over the council, indicated it will veto any such resolution. And U.S. President George W. Bush defended Israel, saying it should not feel constrained to, quote, defend itself.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad accused Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon of trying to drag Syria into war on Tuesday, 2 days after Israeli warplanes struck the Syrian village of al-Durej just outside Damascus. Assad said in his first public statement since Sunday's airstrike that Sharon heads a war cabinet and that he lives by and for war, and there is not a person in the world who believes peace is possible with such a government.
The Israeli claims of the presence of training camps for Palestinians in Syria are desperate claims. There has been no threat of military presence for a long time. It's a serious expression of aggressive Israeli policy and its failure in providing peace and support for Israelis. And the dangerous escalation of the situation in the region is a clear practice of terrorism and violation of international laws. The international society must denounce this attack and hold Israel responsible for the deteriorated situation and to make Israel stop committing crimes in the region. The aggression against Syrian territory and the dangerous escalation show that Israel has started beating the drums of war in the region.
A UN Security Council session failed on Monday to vote on a draft resolution put forward by Syria condemning the Israeli aggression. Washington has indicated that it will veto any such resolution, and now acting as the current Security Council President, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Negroponte, called Monday's session thorough but inconclusive. He only condemned last week's Haifa bombing and justified the Israeli aggression against Syria by claiming that the country harbors alleged terrorists. Syria charged the U.S. with condoning Israeli aggressions against it and described the positions released at the UN session as not encouraging.
Frankly speaking, I mean, the positions we have heard for the moment are not encouraging. On the issue, I mean, of the Israeli attack, we must hear a new position by the United States condemning this action, not condoning Israeli attacks against Arabs, Syrians or Palestinians, a return to the role of the United States as a peace broker, as a, I mean, a reliable, I mean, peace broker that, I mean, looks fairly at the needs of the Arab side, because the present policies reflect one-sided, I mean, understanding of the overall situation, something which has been met with dissatisfaction in the Arab part.
The U.S. pro-Israeli policies were clear in the U.S. President George W. Bush words on Monday when he pointedly refused to join the worldwide condemnation of the Israeli strikes on Syria and said Israelis must not feel constrained in, quote, defending itself.
I talked to Prime Minister Sharon yesterday. I expressed our nation's condolences at the needless murder of innocent people by the latest suicider. That murder came on the weekend of a holy holiday. Secondly, I made it very clear to the Prime Minister, like I have consistently done, that Israel's got a right to defend herself, that Israel must not feel constrained in terms of defending the homeland. However, I said that it's very important that any action Israel takes should avoid escalation and creating higher tensions.
In Cairo, the permanent members of the Arab League held an emergency meeting in response to a Syrian request. The Arab League condemned the Israeli aggression against civilian targets in Syria, describing it as a dangerous escalation that threatens regional and international peace, which may have grave consequences. More details in the report of Mahmoud Hussein.
The Arab world must define their position and put an end to the ongoing Israeli aggression. This explains why the permanent members of the Arab League held an emergency meeting in response to a request submitted by Damascus after Israel hit civilian targets inside Syria. A final declaration was announced after the meeting, describing the Israeli aggression as a dangerous escalation threatening regional and international peace. This aggression may cause things to get out of control and increase the cycle of violence. Arab League members said that the Israeli aggression shows that Tel Aviv is making a mockery of international agreements and held Israel responsible for the consequences of such aggression. The Arab League demanded that the UN Security Council take the responsibility of protecting international and regional peace. Meanwhile, the General Secretary of the Arab League, Amr Moussa, confirmed that Arab countries are in solidarity with Syria and support its right to respond to this kind of aggression.
There is already chaos in the region. Let's be frank, there is chaos in the region and the occupied territories. Some countries believe that what Israel is doing in the occupied territories is legitimate self-defense. Now, does Israel, an occupying state, have a legitimate right over the occupied people? That is total chaos, and it contributes to the existing state of pandemonium. This is a misinterpretation of the legitimate right of people to defend themselves. If the Israeli aggression continues to be justified this way, then all countries should also have the same legitimate right of self-defense. Then no one can be blamed. That is, no one can be condemned if destroying homes while people are still inside is the legitimate right of an occupying country. It is absolutely incomprehensible that an occupying country can justify such actions. This is a new threat to international law which may lead to more chaos. Thus, we refuse to justify it.
The final speech demanded that the UN Security Council put an immediate end to state-sponsored terrorism against the people of Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria.
We must ask the United Nations Security Council for help, and we must always do so. We must support the Security Council regardless of the results.
The Yemeni representative to the Arab League said that Israeli aggression illustrates their arrogance in using force when dealing with Arab affairs.
I believe that this attack illustrates Israeli arrogance. They are underestimating international opinion, the United Nations and countries in the region. Israel does whatever it wishes. It launches attacks whenever it wants to and wherever it wants to, with the protection of a great power, and under the pretext that they are fighting terrorism, they are killing civilians inside populated cities.
Oman's representative in Cairo condemned the Israeli aggression, adding that it is in violation of international law.
We want to show our support and solidarity with Syria in facing the brutal and unjustified Israeli aggression. The aggression is in violation of international laws.
Tel Aviv's intention behind attacking Syria was to send a message to Syria, forcing it to change its position. In response, Arab nations quickly responded by holding an emergency meeting, sending a message to Israel that there are red lines that Tel Aviv must not cross. This message is also of support and solidarity with Syria. From the Arab League headquarters, Mohammed Hussein, Nile News Channel.
Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim summoned this morning the ambassadors of the UN Security Council 5 permanent member countries and briefed them on the content of the message that Foreign Minister Farouk Bashara had sent to UN Secretary General and to the head of the UN Security Council, which includes details of the Israeli raid aggression against a civilian position in Ain al-Sahib village northwest of Damascus and a flagrant challenge of international conventions and charters and international principles and law. The Assistant Foreign Minister stressed to the ambassadors of the 5 permanent member countries the need for their countries to condemn this Israeli aggressive act and prevent Israel from perpetrating such attacks, which constitute a dangerous escalation in the region that would threaten regional and international peace and security. The Assistant Minister urged the 5 countries' ambassadors to vote in favor of a draft resolution that Syria had yesterday submitted to the UN Security Council because this would be in harmony with international society's will in condemning Israeli aggression, deterring it and preventing its repetition. Mr. Walid al-Muallim said that the Israeli current government, with its continued aggression against the Palestinians and with its expansion of such aggression to cover Syria and Lebanon, is but affirming anew that it is in practice a government of war and not a government of peace. The UN Security Council continues this evening the debate of the Syrian proposal, which calls to severely denounce the Israeli aggression launched yesterday against the village of Ain al-Sahib.
The UN Security Council resumes tonight the discussion of the draft resolution proposed by Syria, calling on the Council to severely condemn the Israeli aggression and ask Israel to halt such acts. Earlier, the Council held a public session during which the permanent Syrian envoy to the UN, Dr. Faisal Maqdad, read a statement in which he emphasized that Israel's aggression against the Syrian Ain al-Sahib village is considered a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, the international law, and the disengagement of forces agreement signed in 1974. Dr. Maqdad clarified that the Israeli raid is also a crystal clear expression of the real face of the Israeli policy based on aggression, the violation of sovereignty of states, and disregard of all agreements. The statement also emphasized that through its continued aggression against the Palestinian people and through its intention to expand the area of the aggression, the Israeli government proves anew that it is a government of war and not a government of peace. Dr. Maqdad repeated what was mentioned by the message sent yesterday by Foreign Minister of the Syrian Arab Republic to the Council, in which he emphasized that Syria was not unable to deter Israeli aggression, but Syria practiced utmost degrees of self-control, knowing that Israel is seeking to create pretexts here and there to export its internal crisis to the whole region and expose it to more escalation and explosion. Concluding his speech, Dr. Maqdad expressed confidence that all members of the UN Security Council would respond positively to the Syrian proposal and confront the Israeli challenge through their continued efforts to halt any attack that endangers international peace and security. Other speeches delivered condemned the blatant Israeli aggression against the Syrian territories. The representatives of the 15 permanent member states, except the US, said that the attack is considered a grave escalation and a violation of the UN Charter. They also welcomed Syria's decision to resort to the UN Security Council to resolve the question.
The Arab League Council severely condemned today the Israeli attack against the Syrian territories, stressing that such an aggression represents a flagrant violation of the principle of the international law and all UN charters. In an emergency meeting held last night at the level of permanent envoys, the Council said that the recent Israeli aggression represents a grave escalation that threatens regional and international peace and security that might lead the region to adverse consequences that are difficult to be controlled. Expressing complete solidarity with Syria and its legitimate right to defend its territories, the Arab League Council called on the UN Security Council to immediately interfere to halt Israeli provocative and aggressive policy against Syria. The Council also called for putting an end to the state-sponsored terrorism practiced by Israel in occupied Palestine and against Syria and Lebanon.
As U.S. propaganda blitz against Iran growingly heightens. People in Iran are challenging to convince the IAEA and the international community about the peaceful nature of the country's nuclear activities.
Iranian officials are now taking up technical questions with the IAEA about the peaceful nature of the country's nuclear activities.
While Tehran has till October the 31st to present a response to the International Atomic Energy Agency, public opinion here is focused on Iran's peaceful nuclear programs.
Iran is pursuing a peaceful nuclear program. All countries across the world have the right to use the technology for civilian purposes.
We should not bow to U.S. policies. Iran should apply its nuclear know-how to various industries.
Nuclear fuel is the future need of the country. Iran should refrain from signing the additional protocol while it adheres to the provisions of the NPT.
The United States is willing to remain the sole superpower in the world, and we should not bow to Washington's pressure.
America and the Zionist regime of Israel are the ones who may use nuclear bombs. Iranian officials have repeatedly said they cooperate with the IAEA, and the White House has no right to stop us from acquiring nuclear technology.
What the U.S. says amounts to coercion. Iran is not the only country in the world to utilize peaceful nuclear technology.
These days in Iran, achieving the latest in the world of nuclear industry is the talk of the town. Worse, nuclear technology with a peaceful nature. Saeed Tafili, Tehran.
Iran and UN nuclear watchdog are able to come up with a solution to the current problems. Russian nuclear energy minister spokesman Nikolai Shingarov, saying this on Tuesday, underscores Moscow welcomes any effort to shed light on Iran's peaceful nuclear programs. The spokesman went on to say the policy taken by his country on Iran will remain unchanged, and that Tehran-Moscow nuclear cooperation is confined to the construction of Bushehr power plant, which fully complies with non-proliferation treaty. Meanwhile, addressing a gathering of people in Dezful in southwestern province of Khuzestan, President Mohammad Khatami underlined the Iranian nation and government are determined not to hesitate in their attempts to make scientific and technological achievements. President Khatami went on to say Iran calls for a WMD-free region as well as solidarity among all the regional states and nations in a bid to reach development and democracy. Highlighting Iranian nations suffering as a result of WMDs and the evil phenomenon of terrorism, President Khatami concluded Iran is now a staunch enemy of terrorism in all its forms. The chief executive then described the Zionist regime of Israel as the one that represents war and terrorism in the Middle East. On the recent Israeli assault on Syria, Iranian president said, as an example of state terrorism, the Zionist regime of Israel resorted to threaten aggression in its raid on Syria. The Zionist regime is following a trend of jeopardizing tranquility and stability, staging war and launching aggression in the region. Speaking at the Parliament's open session on Tuesday, Parliament Speaker Mehdi Karoubi also said the UN and world community should pressurize the occupying regime and its backers to halt creating ever more calamitous incidents. The top parliamentarian went on to say it is a known fact that George W. Bush acts as a spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and sides with him in his aggression, which has received worldwide condemnation. Minister of Industries and Mines underlines exchange of industrial information between Tehran and Havana. Esaq Jahangiri said to the visiting Cuban Minister of the Interior, Ricardo Cabrizas, on Monday that bilateral economic cooperation can benefit from the two sides' experiences in different fields, like Iran's know-how in vehicle, steel and cement production, and Cuba's capabilities in nickel production and renovation of sugar plants. The Cuban minister, for his part, expressed hope that Iran's credit worth $20 million put at Cuba's disposal will boost bilateral industrial and trade exchanges.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. And the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.